Welcome to 3-Night Weekend, a new podcast from Sifted Games at sifted.net, where we talk to gaming industry luminaries and help you plan your weekend to come. I'm Shane Satterfield, and you can find me on Twitter at Dinfire. The show goes live every Friday morning for our patrons and the following Monday for everyone else. If you want to listen to it when it's at its full power, head to patreon.com/sifted and pledge at least $4 per month. This week, we're talking to Tommy Tallarico. He's a rare breed in the games industry in that he's worked in just about every one of its corners. From game development to TV work to concert series to hardware, he's truly done it all. All right, here we are with someone who I believe completely defies description within the gaming industry, Tommy Tallarico. We've talked to a lot of people for 3-Night Weekend, but all of them have done maybe one or two things in the gaming industry. Like best case scenario, they worked in the press and they were a developer. But Tommy, you have literally done everything. You've been a developer. You have worked in the press for an extended period of time. You started your own concert series. Mm-hmm. In all honesty, you kind of started the wave of video game OSTs. Sure. And now you're working on hardware. It's crazy. There aren't many people like you. How did you get to this place? Is it just that you have such a passion for games that you're interested in kind of every facet of it?
That would be the one word I would use. Passion. Yeah. I mean, I love everything I do. I'm excited every day I get up. I I only sleep about 4 or 5 hours a day because or a night because
or the day, depending
or the day because I love what I'm doing and I love my life. And my grandfather always told me, they said, look, find a career that you love what you do and you'll never feel like you're working. And that's exactly how I feel. I never, my wife has to come upstairs sometimes and it's like, hey, coming down for dinner? I'm like, yeah, I'll be right there. And that's at 6 o'clock. And then I look up and she's like, hey, you're going to be down for breakfast? I'm like, what?
You're right, though. And I kind of follow gaming for the same reason. I have a journalism degree, and I was like, what do I want to write about whenever I actually start trying to get a job?
Something you love.
Yeah, something you love. And you're right. You never work a day. You may still get worn out, but you never feel like it like you did when you worked a minimum wage job when you were in high school or whatever.
Right. Totally.
Yep. And this started for you at at least the music part of it started for you at a very early age. You knew you wanted to follow music when you were like a kid, right?
Yeah. There was a couple of big influences in my early life. So I started playing piano when I was 3 and guitar when I was 5. Because, when you're that age, you always want to do something to like impress your parents, right? You do something funny, your parents laugh, you do it again,
Yeah.
And for me, my parents were a product of the 50s. So they would always listen to Jerry Lee Lewis, Great Balls of Fire, and Elvis Presley, Jailhouse Rock, stuff like that. So I would learn to, bang those out on the piano. And my parents just thought it was the most amazing thing ever. I was the oldest of an all Italian, 100% Italian family. And they'd call the neighbors over when relatives would come over, look, play. And so, it's like, oh, I'm impressing my parents. So that initially got me into it. And then when I was 5 years old, I remember The Godfather came out. And for an Italian family, even though I'd never really saw or understood The Godfather at such a young age because it was, a violent movie. My parents didn't let me see it, and you don't take your kid to the theater to go see The Godfather. But my dad would always hum the theme, and he got the 8-track on soundtrack or whatever album or something.
It was the 8-track,
right? Yep. And so I picked up a guitar, and then I started learning that again to impress my dad, and then my cousin is Steven Tyler from Aerosmith.
I like how you just slid that in there. Your cousin is Steven Tyler from Aerosmith.
Yeah, his real name is Steven Tallarico. And so we used to go see his shows. And again, I grew up in Massachusetts where, the band was out of Boston. So we'd go to the Boston Gardens and watch. To me, it was just cousin Steven. And then, they put the family on the side of the stage. And here he is performing in front of 30,000 people. And I'm like,
hippies.
When I'm like 7, 8 years old, I'm just like,
yeah,
I guess that looks like a cool job. That's what I wanted to do when I grow up,
Yeah.
And then in 1977, I'm 9 years old, and Rocky, or sorry, 1975, Rocky comes out. 75, 70, I think it was 76. Rocky comes out, and that music, dun, 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 that's what got me into orchestral music. And then the following year in 77, Star Wars comes out.
Oh, wow.
And then Raiders of the Lost comes out, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And then Tron, it was like bam, bam. And video games are the biggest thing.
Yep.
And so it's like, I mean, everybody thinks whenever they grew up was the best time in history to grow up. I totally get that. My mom always says the 50s were the greatest time,
Right.
and I believe her. But for me, and what I love doing, you see how it like just infects my life. It's like Star Wars and video games and Tron and music and, and then in
Gen
1977.
X. Gen X is the best generation.
Right.
It just
78,
we
Van
got to
Halen's
see everything.
first
We got
album
to see
comes out.
analog. We got to see computers and video games appear. We've lived through this whole modern age with cell phones and blockchains and all this other. We have truly seen it all. I think Generation X, we were very lucky.
And again, even in the 70s, we had Led Zeppelin still and the Beatles early on. But then by the late 70s, the Police and Journey and Van Halen's first album, that changed my life for guitar. It's like, I wanted to be like Eddie Van Halen. Rest in peace, Eddie, right?
Yeah.
So that it was all passion. Music and video games were my whole life pretty much growing up.
Now, before we move on, do you still stay in touch with Steven Tyler?
Oh, all the time. We were texting, what was it, like a couple weeks ago? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He's so proud of my accomplishments, and it's been great. I mean, it's really, really cool. And he has a Grammy party every year that that we see each other at least once a year. But it's been tough during the COVID stuff.
The lockdown.
But it's funny though when we're on tour together, meaning we're touring at the same time. Not so like he'll be in Brazil, and I'll be in Chile, and hey, I'm going to be in Brazil tomorrow. Hey, we're playing Peru the following. We're kind of texting each other back and forth, and I'm sending him pictures of the dressing room. I'm like, oh, looks like you'll be here next month.
I'll leave something for you under the rug or whatever.
That's what I did. I left a pic for him in one of the signs in the behind the sign in the dressing room. I said, here, go see if you have that. And then a month later, I get a picture back, and it's a picture of the pic.
It's still there. That's great. That's great. So as a late teenager, you decide to move out to California. You've fallen in love with video games.
I was 21. Okay.
Yeah. And you've decided that you want to make it your vocation. You just move out to California. Very brave. A lot of us have done it. I'm from the East Coast as well. I just moved out in like 1999.
How old were you when you moved out?
26.
Got
so
it.
A little older than you.
By yourself, or did you come out with friends?
I came out with my girlfriend. Yeah. Gotcha. Who is now my wife.
That's the way to do it. See, I was so hungry and driven and passionate and young.
And in some ways stupid and maybe a little too brave.
That's kind of how I meant that, like not, like I look back now and go, God, was I crazy?
Yeah.
But it was that I didn't care about anything else except, making a career in the entertainment world somehow, or video games. And so I moved out. I was 21. I left my parents crying on the doorstep, and I just got in my little 2-seater car and I drove out to California. I had no job out there. I had no friends. I'd never been,
no place to live, right? You were homeless for a while?
I was homeless. Yeah. And I had no money. I had a credit card. Right? I had a credit card with $500 on it to get me all the way to California. And I didn't even know if I was going to run out of gas or not. By the time I got to Vegas, it was like touch and go if I was even going to make it.
You're like, I just got 6 hours to go to make it to LA, please.
Right. Well, I remember I bought a loaf of bread and peanut butter and jelly. And that my 2 weeks that I took to go out there, I think I bought 2. I ended up doing that twice, but that's what I would eat the entire week. Just peanut butter and jellies 3 times a day.
And just an example of how different things were back then. You get a job at like a music store, right?
First day I was there, I picked up a newspaper. I got a job at Guitar Center.
and you're at
next
work
morning
and you're wearing a gaming t-shirt to work.
I did.
And somebody notices your shirt and basically offers you a job based upon you wearing a video game shirt. Is that right?
Yes, but let me set it up for
So
you.
crazy, Tommy.
Because for folks who weren't around back then, this is the late 80s, early 90s. The thing to understand is that there weren't video game t-shirts around back
right
then.
Oh, you stood out. Absolutely.
There's no internet. They didn't have them at Walmart or Kmart or Sears or nothing. There were no video game t-shirts.
The only thing you could get was like Pac-Man Fever t-shirts.
If that.
Those made it into like Hills and like the precursor to Walmart. Hills.
Right. And so the way I got this t-shirt is that I used to read all the video game magazines. I think Electronic Games was around, Bill Kunkel and those guys, and Arnie Katz. And I'd read them religiously. And I saw that this Japanese company, PC Engine, was going to be, they were doing this like kind of US tour, and they were stopping at like 5 or 6 different fairs across the US and Canada. And the closest one to me was in Toronto, which was about an 8-hour drive. And so I begged my mom to please drive me there because I didn't have
that's
car.
A long haul.
And she did. My mom, talk
She's
about
a trooper.
Great mom.
Yep.
Trooper, right? And she gets to the fair. Of course, she wants to go ride on rides with her son and everything. No, we waited in line for 2 hours to play the TurboGrafx 16, and it hadn't even come out yet.
Uh-huh.
And they were basically just doing a focus test. They're like, what do you think of this game? What do you think? Blah, 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 blah. And you'd fill out this thing. And then at the end, they gave me a TurboGrafx 16 t-shirt. And I was just like, well,
worth
this
the
is
trip.
The greatest thing ever.
Worth the 16.
And that was the summer before I went to California. So, when I went to California, I had a little 2-seater car. I had a couple of Roland keyboards, a 4-track Fostex recorder, and I had 3 t-shirts and a pair of jeans. And one of those t-shirts was the TurboGrafx. So when I'm at my first day on the job in California, what shirt am I going to wear? That was like my trophy.
Oh,
so
yeah, the one you're most proud of.
I wore that shirt on the first day, and the first person who walked in, the doors literally opened. The guy was standing outside as the door opens, comes over the keyboard section, and he sees my shirt, and he goes, how the hell do you even know about that? Again, it was TurboGrafx. It wasn't even out in the US yet.
Right.
And I tested games for, I went to
you told him the whole story.
Told him the story. And then I told him how passionate about video games they were. And he's a guy who worked for Richard Branson, and they were starting a Virgin video game company right down the street. And he says, this is great. Hey, do you want a job? I'm like, yes. Doing what? And they said, we'll pay you $6 an hour, and minimum wage was $4 an hour because that's what I was getting at the guitar shop.
Yeah,
that was Guitar Center.
Yeah.
They said, I'll pay you $6 an hour and just play video games, and like you did to get the shirt. And I'm like, well, this is just the greatest.
Are you kidding me?
This California place is okay. Yeah. So I was in the video game. I was in California 3 days, and I was in the video game industry, and I was
unreal
years ago.
Definitely does not happen that way anymore.
No, never happened. Some call it luck, but I don't believe in luck. I call it passion.
It was your passion that you drove to see the TurboGrafx, that you got the shirt, that you came back, and that you struck out with $500 and a loaf of bread.
You make your own opportunities sometimes, and when that opportunity appears, you gotta be able to grab it, and that was. I'm a very positive mental attitude. I believe in, the vibe you put out to the universe, you're going to get it back. If you've ever seen the documentary, The Secret, or read the book, it's, about the art of attraction. Whatever you put out to the world is what you're going to get back. So that's why I'm always trying to put out positive vibes, and it all comes back to you, and so I'm a big believer in fate.
Okay. So you get the job working with Virgin Games, and quickly they realized that you're
homeless.
You were still homeless.
I was sleeping under the pier at Huntington Beach for 3 weeks. The first
before
3
you
weeks I
could
was out
save
there.
up enough money to get an
Yeah, because I
apartment.
didn't know. Again, I'm this young kid. I'd never been to California. And I didn't know anyone in California,
Right.
right? So when you get out there and I'm like, oh, I better get an apartment, and they're like, oh yeah, you need first month's and last month's and a
Yeah.
security deposit. I'm like, what's that? And
Yeah.
like I didn't even know because I'd lived. They're like, oh, you have to pay for electric? Really? I thought
Yeah.
electricity was free. I had zero clue of what was going on. And then of course, when you start a new job, they typically hold back check,
Yep.
right? For
Yep.
the,
That's
the
right.
first paycheck.
That's true.
So
I don't know if they still do that anymore. They used to, though.
I don't know. They did it back then. So
Yep.
so it took me 3 weeks before I had enough money to get an apartment.
Wow. And so you start your job and they quickly realize that you're a musician, which they probably should have figured out from where they met you because you were a guitar center. And you ask them if you can start making music for games and they say yes. And what was it
said,
like?
I do it for free.
Yeah, you said you do it for free.
If you don't like it, you lose nothing.
Yeah. What was it like working in game development really at the very beginning of it all?
It was so, it was exciting like crazy, because anything that like I did that was kind of unique was like special, and the first time
it's like the first time it had ever happened. Yeah,
stuff happened, right? So
yeah,
so like, whether I was like, when I did Terminator on the Sega CD, it was 1993. No one had played live guitar on a video game before, or
it'd all been MIDI before that.
Doing like banjo music in Earthworm Jim. This is before Banjo and Kazooie.
Yeah.
No one had ever heard banjo music coming out of a video game. So it was exciting in that aspect, but it was also very challenging because the technology was so crap back then. The very first game I ever worked on was the original Prince of Persia with Jordan Mechner.
Yeah.
And they didn't have tools for audio, because back then audio was like the very last thing anyone ever did or cared about in a game.
Yep.
And by the time they got to the audio, there was no cartridge space left, there was no money left, and there was no time left. So it's just like, make some sounds, make this sound
and
like
loop them.
4 days,
Yeah.
on a system that no one's written a driver for. And so it was very challenging, but I would sit down with the programmers and I knew basic programming, like the language of basic. Me and my younger brother used to, do dirty text adventures when we were kids,
Yeah, we all did. And you save them on like literally a cassette tape recorder or a floppy disk.
Yeah, or a cassette. That's right.
Yeah.
Cassette. I would cassette before the floppy. Yeah.
Yep.
And anyway, so it was really challenging, but I learned how to take numbers and turn them into music, paragraphs of numbers and turn them into music. And luckily, there was a thing that had just come out called MIDI, which stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. And that basically was an electronic keyboard that it would output what note you were hitting and how long you were hitting it for, and what the space was between the time you hit the next note, right? And so that was enough data to put into a paragraph that I could then get the programmer to throw at the sound chip in the Game Boy or the NES or whatever we were working on at the time. Later on, Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. And so and that's how you made music. So it was challenging, but you'd spend longer trying to get it to sound like something than you did actually writing the music. So
that's funny, because you're right. You think about a game like Prince of Persia, you're like, how to make it sound like Arabic or whatever.
Middle Eastern. I wanted the Middle Eastern. So I went out and I bought a bunch of Middle Eastern, like woodwind albums, and you have to make the MIDI sound like that somehow. Right. I'm self-taught, so I didn't graduate with a degree in music. I don't really know how to read music. I kind of do, but I don't sight read or anything like that. So for me, I learned to play by ear. I did that my whole life. Like, Eddie Van Halen never took a guitar lesson his whole life.
Yep.
And so I would listen to these Middle Eastern albums, and then I would just kind of mimic what I would hear, so you're learning chord progressions, you're learning key signatures and all sorts of, different things like that, just by listening to the pros. And then I kind of, would do it from there.
Okay. And so from there, your career really just exploded. Some would say that you were kind of the first game developer rock star, and not just because you were working in music, which, the obvious parallels are there, but to me, you were kind of the first developer that I saw where I was like, you can make a lot of money making video games. Look, a lot of the early developers, they were kind of frumpy. I mean, I hate to use the word, but they were like nerds, they weren't that concerned about like flaunting the money that they had made. They just wanted to keep making games. You were kind of like the first developer I saw that was like, you know what? I'm going to buy a freaking Ferrari and I'm going to take a bunch of photos with my Ferrari and I'm going to get them out there. I'm going to buy this mansion and I'm going to make it like a gamer's paradise. And I'm going to show people that I have this mansion with all this cool stuff in it. Right. To me, I don't look at it as like a narcissistic thing. I think it was good for the industry because I think it allowed a lot of people to dream and see that this is this attainable thing that they can get to via games. And as time has gone on, I believe people have found that there's different ways to get to that same goal. Yeah. But I really think that you were inspirational for a lot of people, Tommy, as far as like seeing like, wow, like you can become really successful. I am sure a lot of kids who were maybe going to college and said, you know what, I'm going to learn to be a programmer. And their parents were like, you're crazy.
I guarantee
letters. A lot of people said, oh, really? And pulled out a photo of you with your Ferrari and said, this is what you can do. And like, I'm sure some people, back then they were probably like, what's Tommy doing? Putting up his photos with his Ferraris. But to me, it created dreams and aspirations. And I feel like probably for a lot of people, that was the case.
Yeah, it's interesting because there is kind of a fine line between, egotistical narcissism and confidence, right? And so that's and some people misconstrue confidence with being stuck up or egotistical or whatever. Yep. So for me, again, always having a positive attitude, always feeling like I'm going to make it to the top of the mountain, like my best friend, David Perry, who was the programmer of Earthworm Jim, considered the father of cloud gaming. Yep. He always says, look, I've been Tommy's best friend for, 30 plus years. And I wouldn't bet against him. Everything that I've ever set out to do, I don't do it half-assed. And I consider it a goal. And in my mind, I will succeed, right? And if I can dream it, I will achieve it. And some people look at that and say, oh, wow, that's what a jerk, what a conceited jerk that he thinks he's just assumes that he can win and succeed. Yes. And if that's considered being crossing the line into, into narcissism, well,
whatever.
I disagree, but that's a different thing. But so some people took that the wrong way, I think maybe. But like you said, more people thought it was cool. But here's the reason I did it, though. Here's the reason I did it. There's two reasons. One is exactly what you mentioned. When people would think, what is a video game developer? They picture like you mentioned, a negative thing. And it's like, but there were a bunch of cool people in the video game industry. It wasn't is necessarily like that as much as people would think it would be. Mm-hmm. And so it was to break that stereotype. That was the first thing. But the second thing, and the most important reason for me is that back then, nobody knew who worked on video games.
Nope.
Nobody. It was very rare. Like nobody know who Koji Kondo was,
Nope.
the musician from the Mario. They wouldn't put people's names in credits back then.
Yep.
Right? It was very, especially Nintendo, keep everything close to your chest. We don't want you to know anyone who's working with us, right? And again, this is in the 80s, early 90s.
There was the one guy from Activision, even in the Atari
David Crane.
David Crane. He
so
was
David,
kind of the first.
He was like one of the first. Well, even before that, like EA was the first company to like put the developers in an ad. You know, as a 2-page ad, you can look it up, and it was, you know, all these great, you know, great designers back then. But it was very rare. It was very rare. And so for me, after I left Virgin, I was getting calls from EA and Konami and Capcom and Activision and the GT Interactive at the time, and they all wanted me to Namco, Sega, they all want Midway, they all wanted me to go work for them instead. Yep. So I'd get headhunter calls all the time. I had won Best Music of the Year award 4 years in a row. In fact, in 1994, I was 4 of the 5 final nominees because I had Terminator, Earthworm Jim, I think Aladdin was in there, Skeleton Warriors or something. It was like 94 or 95, I forget. But and so everyone was calling me because I had come out with an album on Capitol Records. That's the only way they really knew my name. They're like, who's this?
The first real video game OST, right?
It was the very first commercially released worldwide with a major label, Capitol Records. It was so old because it came out in 94, I think was the official launch date. But it came out on CD and cassette. So wow. I still have a cassette right over there of the album. So that's how old I am. But yeah, and it was, so people were recognizing this name. And so when I would go to the conventions and I would generate press for myself, I would just literally call up the magazines. Because again, this is before email, right?
You had to call.
And I would call up.
You could fax them.
I would call up Andy Eddy, who would be, you know, the editor of video games and computer entertainment. And I'd call and I'd be like, you know, because you look in the magazine, you see a phone number. Hi, who's the editor? Andy Eddy. Hi, I'd like to speak to Andy Eddy. And they're okay. And they'd put me right through, right? Yeah. And I would start, hi, Andy, my name's Tommy Tallarico and I write music and blah, blah, blah. Oh, really? You work on games? Yeah. What game? Global Gladiators. Oh, I love that game. And boom, you start to talk and you start to form relationships and friendships with these folks.
Yep.
And so I would send them pictures and I would do all this crazy stuff to, you know, that no one was doing at the time. Yep. And again, some people might look at that and go, oh God, that guy was an attention whore. but what I was doing was I was trying to break the stereotype and trying to make a name for myself, because when I left Virgin, when I left in 94, I had over $2 million in contracts. I was working on the Madden football games. I was working on Namco stuff. I was working on Earthworm Jim. I was working on, you know, and still doing Virgin stuff as well. Activision, EA. And again, that was a lot of money for back then.
Heck yeah.
And so that was the reason for it, was to just make a name for myself so that people, when they thought of video game music and audio, they would think of me and think of my company. And I got news for you. It worked.
It did work
like a charm. It got me a lot of business.
Now, for me, your crowning achievement as far as game audio is Metroid Prime.
There you go.
I don't know if a lot of people even realize that you worked on the soundtrack for Metroid Prime.
I didn't work on the soundtrack. So the original Metroid composer did the music, and it's an interesting story. So I've been friends with Shigeru Miyamoto, and for those out there who don't know Shiggy, Miyamoto-san, he's the guy who created Mario, created Zelda, he is the greatest of the greats. He's the Steven Spielberg of the video game industry. I'd known him for many, many years. We met actually in early 91, I believe it was. And we met at a CES show before there was E3.
Yep.
We used to be
It was
part of
CES.
CES.
Yep.
And so he'd always loved my audio and loved my soundtracks. And so I was doing a lot of the stuff on the Sega Genesis, which was kind of his big rival with the Super Nintendo. And he's like, he would always say, how do you make it sound so good?
Yeah.
The Genesis. And so we were at a party, and it was at E3, I believe. So it must have been like 97 or 98. And we were at a Nintendo party. And a mutual friend of ours, Jeff Spandenberg, who is the president, owner, founder of Retro Studios.
Yeah.
He's not there anymore, but
yeah, he didn't last long. In fact, he got himself in a little bit of trouble eventually.
He got himself in I think some trouble with Nintendo or something. I don't remember the story exactly, or I just don't want to retell it. No, but Jeff's a buddy. And so, and me and Jeff were always cool. And so Jeff comes up to me, goes, hey, me and Miyamoto want to talk to you. Do you have a few minutes? I'm like, are you kidding me? Do I have a few minutes for the king? I always have, hail to the king.
There's one person you had time for.
Yeah. I don't care who I was with or who I needed to see. I was dropping that and going to see the master.
Yep.
And so we went over kind of in a corner, and he says, look, you cannot tell anyone this, and so I didn't even sign like an NDA or anything. Look, you can't tell anyone this, but we're doing Metroid Prime. We're bringing Metroid back, and we're calling it Metroid Prime. We're like, what? Huh?
Yeah.
What? This is crazy. And he goes, and me and Miyamoto would like to hire you to do the sound design for the game. And of course, I yes,
no
like
yeah.
I didn't care how much money they were paying. I didn't care, whatever they wanted. It didn't matter to me. And so I worked on that for a couple of years. And at the time, Retro had like 4 or 5 other games they were working on. So they had an in-house audio department who was awesome. They were epic, amazing audio folks. And then what happened is Nintendo wasn't happy with the direction that Metroid was going. And because Retro had a bunch of other games, Nintendo came in and said, look, we're canceling all your projects, and you're all going to work on Metroid from now on. And my contract was just coming to an end. I think it was like a couple of years or something. The contract was like 2 or 3 years. I'd have to look it up. I have the contract around here somewhere. And I had done a couple hundred sounds, I think, at the time. Maybe not even that much. It might have been 100. I don't remember. Again, I have to look at the contract. But I'd done a lot of the weapon sounds, the visor sounds. We did some cinematics for Space World and things like that. And so when that happened, my contract was up, and they said, Tommy, we love you. You did great, but the whole company is going in a different direction now, and we have all these internal people. I'm like, no problem. Totally fine. No worries. Like, I was happy to be a part of it. And again, I worked directly with Miyamoto on the sounds and stuff.
That's
it was
amazing.
And then the game like went through a lot of delays. I think it came out like 2 or 3 years later, went through like 3 or 4 different producers. So when the game came out, they didn't know that I had even worked on it at that point. And so
are you not in the credits?
My name wasn't in the credits.
Wow, that stinks.
But what happened is when they were working on Metroid 2 Echoes, I get an email from Scott Peterson, who was the head of Retro Audio, who 20 years later is still the head of Retro Audio and is super talented guy, amazing. He emails me out of the blue. I didn't really even know him. Hi, my name's Scott Peterson. I'm the audio. We're doing this second Metroid game, and we found this. We don't know where these sounds came from, and they're like some of the most significant sounds for weapons and things. And we saw this folder that says Tommy Tallarico Studios. So did you work on this game? I said, yeah, I did. And oh my God, this is so cool. And he was looking for higher res versions of the sounds, because when we had originally put them in, we had to downsample the hell out of them.
Yeah, compress them basically.
Exactly. They were using a bigger cart or something like that, so they had better.
Discs now.
Disc.
Yeah,
they were going to the disc, and they were like, "Can we get these at a higher bit rate?" And I said, "Sure." So I, gave him that stuff. So I have that letter, and he's like, "So sorry we left you out." I said,
"Now, were you in the credits for Echoes?"
I don't know if I was. I don't think I was. I didn't really ask.
Well, at least you got paid, right?
But I didn't even care. Like, I've worked on 350 games. If you go on Moby Games, they don't have half the games on there. I have them on my website, right? So and the reason I had to list them on my website, and I also had to show proof of every game, was because I in 2008, I think it was, I got the Guinness World Record for the person who's worked on the most video games in their lifetime.
Oh, wow.
And in order to do that, you have to show proof of every game. So they said, could you have proof? And it took me like about a month and a half
of just compiling.
Because again, this is like, like YouTube was just coming out, I think, at the time or whatever, or maybe it was out, but like now you can go on YouTube and see the credits of any game pretty much ever, or
there's no archive of that stuff back then.
There's websites that have every single credit and booklet scanned in. But lucky for me, I collected every single game that I ever worked on. And like I said, about half of them had my name in the credits. Another half, a big bulk of them had my name in the credits at the end of the game. So now I had to finish the game and record them. And me and a group of my friends did it, actually. It wasn't just me, but a couple of people who worked for me. We all kind of pitched in. And then the ones that I didn't, I had to have letters from the company. And for Metroid, I used Scott Peterson's email.
Nice.
But so it was a different time back then. Now, of course, credits are...
Everything's very official now, and everything's buttoned up with crazy contracts and NDAs. It definitely was a different time. And speaking of a different time, around that same point in your career, you ran into Victor Lucas at E3.
1995.
And you
94.
guys hit it off. And
right from the get-go.
Right from the get-go. And an amazing pairing was born.
A brother from another mother. Yes.
What a partnership that you guys embarked on at that point, and you decided to move into television. Now, how hard was it for you to do that, having kind of built your entire career around music? Or were you convinced at that point you'd be able to do both?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was second nature. Musician, performing. I'd been in bands. I was always the front man. I was, so to me, it was just another way of performing. It's just that now they're recording it on camera. And the hardest part for me initially was because again, I had never done anything like this before, really. I had hosted ABC in concert with Peter Gabriel and Todd Rundgren. I had done that in I think that was 93. And I hosted the entire show. And because they asked me to host the show, and hey, we'll get this video game guy who makes video game music to do it. And I thought it was a cool angle. And the show talked about video game music, and because CD-ROMs were just coming out and this and that. And Peter Gabriel was like, and Todd Rundgren were doing interactive music. And so that was a big deal for me, but that was all just, hey, Tommy, intro Peter Gabriel. Oh, okay. Hey, one of my favorite dudes of all time, Peter Gabriel. But when I had sat down to do the TV show again, and they were doing this all for the first time, so they had me read off cue cards. So they'd put the cue cards in front of the camera. And I never felt comfortable with that. And I was struggling with that.
It's hard. It's really hard to read a teleprompter.
It's hard to read and make it sound natural.
Yeah.
And so what I told Vic is I said, look, Vic, and Vic wasn't even on the show at this point. He was just behind the camera. I was the guy who dragged him. I said, dude, I'm dragging you in front of the camera, because we'd have all these great conversations about video games when the cameras were off. And I'm like, dude, we should be filming this.
Yeah, that should be a part of the show. Yeah.
Right. So he didn't want to do it. And I finally forced him on it. And now you can't get him off the camera. No, I'm kidding. No, Vic's the best. And
20 some years later. Yeah.
25, 26 years later.
Yeah.
And so I said, Vic, why don't we just throw the cue cards away? Just tell me what you want me to say, or tell me the topic, and I'll do a cold open,
riff.
and I'll do an open for it. And that's what we did. And so the first day I was really struggling. I was sweating. I was uncomfortable. And then that night I said, hey, Vic, I mean, I might be out of place here. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but can we just try it tomorrow with this? And he goes, yeah, sure. Why not? And then boom, it was like that. And then I never felt uncomfortable in front of the camera ever again.
And so you guys did initially Electric Playground, which then turned into Reviews on the Run. Well, Reviews on the Run was a segment inside Electric Playground, which was then eventually split out completely for Judgment Day.
Right. And it was Judgment Day on G4.
Right.
But it was called Reviews on the Run everywhere else
in Canada and everywhere else.
It was a worldwide syndicated show. So I'll get emails and social media messages from like kids in Malaysia, or kids in Italy, or people in Australia who watched the show growing up on television. So yeah, it was
pretty amazing. Cool. Yeah. And then I was at G4 at that point. I was working on X-Play, and I was the guy who was and I was the guy who was handling all the reviews for X-Play.
Got it. Okay. So, and then
little known secret. It's not a secret. Everybody knows this. Adam and Morgan weren't the ones reviewing the games. Sure. We had a huge staff of freelance writers who were reviewing the games, and then they would present the reviews on the show. Yeah. And so I was kind of the editorial guy who was handling the reviews, making sure that our stuff was consistent. And then you guys we had another review show on G4, which was your show called Judgment Day.
Right. Well, it was just two guys talking with zero script or,
I mean, but it was from the heart. I think the appeal of that show is it was from the heart. And I remember we would get messages from our fans saying, who is this Tommy Tallarico guy? Like, some of his reviews are like crazy. They'd be like, there was like a Smash Brothers review or something.
I gave it 4.5, I think, or something. Yeah, I give it a 3.5 or something. I hated it.
And people thought that we were responsible for what you guys were doing.
Oh, sorry about that.
So I was getting emails about your reviews, and I'm like, we have nothing to do with Judgment Day. And I'll tell you, like, but they're good dudes, so go easy on them. Like, they're just telling you the truth, how they feel about stuff.
Look at that. I had haters back then.
But everybody does. I mean, anyone who works in this industry.
You can't be considered semi-famous or famous unless you have haters.
People have told me the day you stop receiving hate mail is the day your career is over.
You should retire at that point. Exactly.
Because that means that you're not stirring any kind of passion inside the viewers. Exactly. And I will say you did an amazing job of that. I didn't agree with some of your reviews, but I felt like from your perspective, you could back it up. Like
that's an interesting thing, Shane. And I think you nailed it. Like, I never considered myself a reviewer. Right. And Vic always considered himself a journalist but
that's why your show worked. He was a straight guy. You were the foil.
But bad cop, good cop, right? Yep. But for me, what I would always tell people is I say, look, I'm telling you what I think. No one else. I'm not rating this game based on what I think merits what other people should buy it or not. So please, if you like the kind of games that I like, then maybe you'll like this, or maybe you won't like this.
Yep.
But if you like I hated not point and click, those space games where it was like these massive multiplayer, and you just, oh God, I
click on the galaxy and you get in a ship, and it would take 3 hours to get somewhere, and you're
boring as hell
and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I'm like, brutal. And for what they were good games. And if I was completely non-subjective, thinking about this as the game probably deserved a 9. But For
To
me, I'm
you,
like, I hate it. I don't like it. I'm giving it a 2. And Vic, of course, would love it and give it a 9. And that interaction of
yeah,
two friends talking to each other. And so that's where the dichotomy, and I think people were expecting me to be doing what you guys were doing, which
right,
is,
yeah,
hey, present a non-biased thing like we see in the magazines.
yep,
And my whole thing was like, look, there's 100 magazines out there to give you that.
that are doing that, yeah.
You want my opinion? Look, I think I like extreme beach volleyball, and Vic hated it, So it's like,
Yep.
I like fishing games, and Vic
Yeah,
hated them. He thought those were boring, which I
Yep.
totally understand. So yeah, for me, Smash Brothers, I hated like button mashing. I was into Tekken. I
Okay.
was into Virtual Fighter. Like those were the style of fighting games I was into at that point. So when Smash Brothers came out, I was like, it's like this kiddie, cartoony. Like I like Tekken, like. And
Have
so
you
I'm
ever
like,
grown to like Smash Brothers after all these years?
what's that?
Have you ever grown to like Smash Brothers after all these years?
I've grown to appreciate it,
But you still don't like it? Yeah.
but I still don't. I still
I don't either. I'll be
play
honest
it.
with you. I don't like Smash Brothers either.
Yeah,
So I do
I still
appreciate
don't.
it. And I know there's a lot of depth there. And I know the people that love it. I know why they love it.
Exactly.
It's just not for me. Yeah.
And I feel the same way. See, the difference was if you were reviewing a type of game like that, the professional way to do it was, okay, I personally don't like it, but I'm going to take my bias out and I'm going to judge
objectively,
this game
it's a good game still. Yeah.
and it's a good game, right?
Yeah.
But the way we did our show is like, again, we put it right in the front. Opinions. This is an opinion show.
Yeah.
It's our opinions that,
I think that's why people like the show. You're
people like the
unpredictable. They could tune in, and even if they had already read 10 reviews for a game, they still didn't know what you were going to say about the game.
Right.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people liked it. And because you did have Victor there to kind of play the other side, the more objective, the like, well, really, this is good. You may not like the aesthetics of it. Like, because you had that balance there, that's why the show worked. And worked
totally.
it
If it
did.
was just me complaining, that wouldn't be be good. It wouldn't be good.
And but it did
or
work.
saying how great a fishing game was. It wouldn't be good.
But it did work. And that show ran for a really long time.
Yeah.
You were pretty engaged with it until around 2006. Is that right?
2007 is when I left the show. And the reason I had to leave the show was, so I was doing video game audio.
Yep.
In 2002, I started a nonprofit organization called the Game Audio Network Guild.
Gang. Yep.
I was doing that. I was doing 104 30-minute episodes a year.
That's a lot.
So I would leave for a week, 1 week every month. And I would live in Vancouver for a week, and we would tape
just crank
12,
out the shows.
15 shows. And then I would go back, and then I'd play games again in my spare time. And then I'd fly up there again. And I did that for 12 years. 12 years.
That's a grind.
And then I start Video Games Live.
Yep.
And our first show was at the Hollywood Bowl in 2005. Well, by 2007, we were doing like 30, 40 shows a year. And we got it up to 50,
you continued
60 shows.
Doing the show for 2 years after you started Video Games.
Yes. And for me, I had been on TV for 12 years. I loved it. But if I had a personal choice after you're on TV for 12 years, like if it was reversed, I would have picked, like if I was on the road for 12 years touring,
right, and then the TV
got
presented
offered a TV
itself,
show,
you probably would have jumped.
I probably would have jumped into the TV show.
Yeah.
So, but the way it worked out is 12 years TV, traveling, or playing in front of tens of thousands of screaming people, adoring fans of video game music around the world. Adrenaline, like there's nothing that gets your adrenaline like that.
Well, it's different because you can see the people. When you're on TV,
it's instant.
It's just you and the camera. And you're like, I think people are eventually
maybe that was funny. Yeah, maybe that was funny.
Yeah,
maybe
but when you're there on stage and you have 10,000 people there, you're getting that feedback immediately. I've also been in bands throughout my life. There's no feeling like performing live on stage. There just isn't.
And Shane, you can there's, and you can't really explain this to people unless you've been on stage, and is that there is this magic in the air. You become one with the audience.
Yeah,
it's
amazing.
You can feel if they're uncomfortable. You can feel if they're happy. You can feel if they're sad. You can feel if they're if they're laughing and something's funny and you're elated. Like when you're playing and you're just in the zone and they're in the zone. There's been times on stage, Shane, and I've played in front of hundreds of thousands of people in one night, right? I've played in front of millions of people around the world, 550 performances of Video Games Live, which is a Guinness World Record, the longest running symphony tour ever.
Yeah.
And I can tell you there was times on stage where it hits that first note of Castlevania and the lights come on and you're playing places like Brazil or Chile or Red Rocks in Colorado, sold out 9,000 people, and the lights go on. You'll literally, for me, I have to focus on staying conscious.
I know it. I know the feeling.
Because your adrenaline is going so much, you start to black out a little bit.
Yeah, you get
start
dizzy.
to get a little dizzy. It's that crazy.
It's amazing. Now, you said earlier that you always aim for the stars and you assume that you're going to succeed. Yes. And I think that is how you do succeed. You have, if you're not going to be positive, nobody else is going to be positive for you.
If you think you're going to fail, you will.
You're going to fail. Absolutely. Yeah. So my question to you is, even in your wildest dreams, did you think Video Games Live would become as big as it has as quickly as it has?
Yes.
You did.
But
I
want to.
I'm surprised. I'll just be honest with you. I'm surprised at how successful. I love it, by the way.
Yeah.
Like it's something I can take my wife to, and she has a new appreciation for what I do. That's important to me. But still, I am shocked at how huge it has become.
So I'll say yes, with the caveat of, but I was naive.
Okay.
Meaning when I set myself to do something, I will achieve the goal. I consider everything in my life goal. Like I set goals for myself. Some are small, some are medium, some are huge, some are ginormous.
Yep.
In Television Amico, ginormous, the biggest mountain. And I always relate them to mountains, my goals, right? And so I'm like, oh, that's a medium-sized mountain. That's a high mountain. I know when I set a goal for myself, I know 100% that I will be at the top of the mountain. I don't know when, may not exactly know how I'm going to get there. And I know along the way, it's going to rain. It's going to sleet. There's going to be windstorms. I'm going to be holding on for dear life. There's going to be a rock slide in my face. I'm going to fall down 20 feet. There's going to be people underneath me trying to drag
you down and get ahead of you.
But I know I'm going to get up there. Right.
Yep.
And so when you start something like Video Games Live, it was funny. I remember I was sitting in my agent's office, and he's the #1 music agent in the world, in the planet. This is the guy who was the, booking agent for like Prince and Van Halen and Britney Spears and Lady Gaga and Nine Inch Nails. This is the guy who helped create Lollapalooza. This is the guy who created Coachella and all these amazing things. The #1 guy his name's Mark Geiger. You look him up on Wikipedia.
Oh, I know. I'm familiar with Mark. Yeah.
He's incredible.
Yep.
And so and he's my friend and he's my agent, and I'm sitting in his office at William Morris and talent agency, and we're talking about Video Games Live, and he's really excited and he totally gets it. And he's like, okay, so, so where should we start? I said, well, I want to play the Hollywood Bowl with the LA Philharmonic. And he's like laughing at me, like, Tommy. Look,
not going to happen.
Let me tell you, I've been in the industry a long time. I'm biggest of the big. Let me tell you something. One, no one starts a show in LA, because LA
that's the Mecca. That's what you have to build up to. You start in like Poughkeepsie, New York, or
and get the show good.
Get it going.
Tune it up.
Yeah.
Screw it up a bunch of times.
Right.
Play in Idaho, play in Wisconsin, then you play when it's great. Then you come to LA, because
you're not just talking about LA. You're talking about the Hollywood Bowl.
And not so then
for people who don't live in LA, that's really the pinnacle. Like if you want to go see a show in the best possible venue in Los Angeles,
that's right.
It's the Hollywood Bowl.
It's where the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix and Frank Sinatra played.
It's just an amazing venue. It's outdoors. It's perfect. The acoustics are great. Yeah.
And that's why I picked it, because it was the best in the most prestigious, best orchestra and the best,
And the LA Phil plays there all summer long as well.
That's right.
Yep.
And so I said, look, I'm going to play the bowl. And he goes, first of all, that's bad. Like you want to tune up the show. He goes, the second point, Tommy, is that maybe you tour for 10 or 15 years. Maybe you get a bunch of gold and platinum records. Maybe you get a couple of Grammys, and then maybe you get invited to play the Hollywood Bowl.
Yeah.
You don't do your first show ever.
I've never seen a scrubby band at Hollywood Bowl. It's always been like a band I've really wanted to see for a long time. Yeah,
exactly. And so I sat in his office and I said, look, I'm playing the Hollywood Bowl at the LA Phil. And he's laughing because he knows me. And he's like, you're not going to let this go, are you? I said, we're playing the Hollywood Bowl. And and it was funny because me and my buddy who Jack Wall, who's conductor of Video Games Live, we're leaving the meeting and we're going down in the elevator. And he's just like this, like kind of laughing because he knows me as well. He's like laughing. He goes, we're going to play the Hollywood Bowl, aren't we? And I said, damn right we are.
Damn right we are.
Lo and behold, 2 years later, I'm on the stage, first show ever at the Hollywood Bowl. I got Steve Vai playing guitar with me. I got the LA Philharmonic, tens of thousands of people. Are you ready for this? Hideo Kojima of Metal Gear Solid flies over to Japan for me to see the show and bring him on stage. I got the creator of Tron, Steve Lissenberger, on stage with me. I got life-size light cycles zooming across the stage. I got people on wires floating around. I have the Nintendo folks from Nintendo of America all came down. I had the Halo team fly down. I had the Blizzard Entertainment team were there. I had Yuji Naka, the creator of Sonic the Hedgehog. He flew out from Japan, did the meet and greet. Nolan Bushnell from Atari. People didn't even know who these people were at the time, right?
Yeah.
And they were just starting to, how they learned about them? A lot of people from G4 Icons.
Absolutely.
Right?
Great show.
Great show.
Still to this day, great show. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. And so he, and again, people and my friends are like they're sitting there and my mom's there, my dad and they're sitting in the audience, and Stan Lee's there. I call up Stan Lee's my buddy. I worked with him on Spider-Man and other projects, and we became legit friends. And so I call him up. I said, Mr. Lee, call me Stan. Hey, okay. Excelsior, Tommy, and I said, Stan, would you like to come to my Video Games Live show and do the red carpet for me? He goes, I'd love to. And then he would come to the show, and he after the show, he comes backstage. We had this big party and stuff. And he goes, Tommy, he puts his hand on my shoulder. He goes, I tell you, kid, he goes, I didn't know a single damn thing that was happening up there on screen, but I love the music.
Awesome. That's great.
And so there's a perfect example. And so in my mind, when I start to create it, I'm thinking Hollywood Bowl, Stan Lee and Hideo Kojima in the audience, tens of thousands of people, LA Phil behind me, me and Steve Vai jamming on guitar, Goodyear blimp looking down on us. That's what I think. So in my mind, when you ask me the question, did you ever think Video Games I would get to be? At the beginning, yes, I really did. But the reality is that when I look back now and realize what I pulled off and go,
wow,
I surprised myself, right? And I'm like, holy crap. But to build it to where it was such hard work, grinding.
So many phone calls.
I mean, it's just 2 decades of my life and my career to build that up. So I was naive to think that it would be this great thing, just like I'm naive now about in television. You ask me how many in television, you're going to be successful with in television? Hell yeah, we're going to sell 100 million units. We're going to,
I
we're
like
going to
that.
sell tens of millions of units. We're going
Well,
to
I can tell you've worked in television because you just segued into the next part of the discussion, which is what you're doing now. So video games live becomes huge, far beyond what I expected it to become.
Yeah.
And you decide to become the president of Intellivision Entertainment and relaunch the Intellivision. Why, Tommy?
So the after doing a lot of things that I've done in my career, I've worked on the biggest video games of all time, from Tony Hawk to the Sonic to Madden Football, Earthworm Jim, Disney's Aladdin, Metroid Prime, Guitar Hero, worked on, right?
Mm-hmm.
TV shows, winning Telly Awards and Emmy Awards, and getting to the top of that field, and literally everything I've ever set my mind to do, I've done, and I did it for decades, right?
Yeah.
The TV show for 12 years, my music career for 30 years,
yep.
Touring video games live 20 years, right?
Yep.
And so, I was like, well, what can I do now in the video game industry?
Like, what's left?
Like what? Yeah, right. I mean, I'm being honest. And I was thinking, like, I could create a studio and do video games, but everyone kind of does that.
Yeah, it's also really, really hard and really, really expensive. And
yeah, but
it's a tough business.
anyone can start an indie game company and put out content and stuff like that, right? Yep. So I'm like, yeah, everybody does that. And then I start to get this crazy thing in my head where it's like, well, I see this huge gaping hole in the video game industry, which is when I was growing up playing in television, my fondest memories of playing video games, and Shane, I'm interested to know if you feel the same way. My fondest memories of playing video games was when I was playing with other people.
Yeah.
Whether it was
Mario
Kart on the N64 or GoldenEye on the N64, Mario Kart on Super Nintendo, Bomberman on the Saturn, or Major League Baseball on television with my dad, whatever it was, my fondest memories. And what happened is when the internet creeped into the video game industry in the late 90s, as you remember, multiplayer gaming, the majority now was a kid in a dark room with their headphones on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And that couch co-op experience started to go away. And every video game system since, the last video game system that came with two separate controllers was Super Nintendo in 1990.
Wow.
That was the last video. Now people say, well, the Switch, well, no, that's one controller that you split
you can use
bricks.
Yeah.
But
Nintendo has kind of tried to revive that a little bit with Switch. Because if you look at the early marketing, a lot of the trailers and commercials will have the tablet propped up on a table, and they'll have people sitting around beside each other playing. So they are trying to rekindle it a little bit.
They did it with the Wii though. The Wii,
that's true.
Which was 15 years ago. Like my mom bought a Wii.
Yeah.
My mom never bought a video game system, but she bought a Wii because she wanted to go bowling, and it was simple, easy, fun, right? Yep. But the thing I found most interesting about the Switch, and by the way, I love the Switch, I love Nintendo, I love them all, I love Sony, Microsoft. How can you call yourself a gamer if you don't?
I'll never understand it. I think that's something people our age get that a lot of the younger kids just don't get, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, exactly. Love everything.
Yeah.
Why not love all the systems for what they are? And there's things I don't like about every system as well, and that's fine too. What me and you, what gamers consider to be casual on home consoles, because you would probably be like me and say, name a casual co-op game on the Switch, you'd say Overcooked would be
the first game that came to mind when you said that.
Right? Animal Crossing is another great casual game, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what's casual to us is not casual to a casual gamer or a non-gamer, or let's call them hyper casual gamers.
Yep.
3.1 billion people play this every day. Mobile games.
Mobile games. Yeah.
Mobile games have completely taken over the entire video game industry.
I hate to admit it, but you're right. Yeah. People don't really understand the scale that mobile's at.
What people don't realize is the video game industry is $150 billion a year industry, 160 billion. It's been double-digit growth over the last 30 years. And then when you get into a pandemic, worldwide pandemic, worst economy ever, it goes up 20%, right? Yep. So, but what people don't realize is that that money that's being spent, 20% of that is in PC, 25% of that is all of the home consoles, and the remaining 55% of all the money that's made in video gaming is mobile. So it almost triples PC market, and it more than doubles home console. But when me and you or the average person say, when you think of video game, you think of Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo.
Yep.
So the way I designed Amico and thought of it is, if you add up PC, Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, those, and let's call them gamers, let's call them hardcore gamers.
Core gamers.
Console gamers, console and PC gamers. That's 200 million people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But 3 billion people play this.
Yeah.
Why do 3 billion people play this and they're not playing home consoles? And now, obviously, the simple answer is, well, it's convenient. Everybody's got one in their pocket. True. But when you start to dig deeper, you start to realize that we factor comes in, which is
simple,
home consoles
accessible,
are too expensive. They're too complicated. The controls are too complicated. I don't understand it. There's too much of a learning curve. If I want to play 4 players, I have to buy 4 PlayStation controllers at $70 a pop. And that's the mindset of a non-gamer. But they find comfort in this. But what's wrong with this? Well, it's all microtransaction based. We know that. And if you're not paying for it, then you're getting a 30-second ad every 3 minutes. This isn't really great as a controller. It's great for pop bubble games and match 3, but try to play Pac-Man on this.
Oh, I know.
Up, down, left, right.
It's the reason I don't play mobile games.
And 98% of it's garbage. How many fart apps do you need? The answer is 4, by the way. Yeah. And so what I thought to myself was, what if there was a system that had all of the retro sensibilities that people like me and you grew up with? We didn't have violent games back in the day. Oh. But the biggest thing is, what if every single game was casual, hyper casual co-op? Yeah. What if it didn't matter what your skill level was, that you could just pick, like similar to the Wii, where you could just pick it up and play and you understood it? And that's what Amico is. Our 4 pillars of our company, Shane, are simple, affordable, family, entertainment. And those 4 words spell out the word safe, because here's a video game console that parents don't have to figure out how to set the parental controls, because they never have to.
What is the target release date for Amico at this point?
10/10/2021. So
10/10/21.
Yeah, and COVID hit us pretty good, you know. Yep. There's a scarcity with components all over the world now. Sony,
not just for you guys, Sony and Microsoft are dealing with the same thing. Yep.
Amazon or Apple and Samsung are buying up everything, and so it's difficult out there. So we had to delay it. We originally wanted to come out 10/10/2020 of last year. And the date was significant to me. Part of the reason I picked it was 2 reasons. One, you get out before Christmas, because you don't want to come out on Black Friday with everyone else, right? Yep. So you get a little dip in the pool before the
big boys start coming in. Yeah.
And 10/10 was my sister's birthday, who unfortunately passed away about 20 years ago. So it was a dedication to my sister. So 10.
Oh, what a bummer that it didn't happen, man.
And it was a bummer, but to me, Shane, I'm not going to put out a half-assed, rushed product.
Why
To
would you
me,
though? It would be foolish. You just end up wasting all your time, all your money.
I would, and I think Miyamoto has his great quote, which is, people never remember
That a game was delayed, but they always
game was
remember
delayed.
one that was put out and it was a piece of crap. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Something like that, right?
Yep.
You always see that Miyamoto meme. I don't even know if he really said it, but we're not like, I'm not sitting here drinking my own Kool-Aid going, oh, we're going to be just as big as Sony, Microsoft. And they're billion-dollar companies.
Right.
We don't have the infrastructure they do. We don't have the technology that they do. We don't have the marketing strength that they do. But I'll tell you what we do have. We have passion and we have ideas. And that's the one thing where we can compete with the big folks.
They can't be nimble. It's very hard to be. Their projects start 3 years out.
And they cost $20 million. And it's
way more than that.
People,
way more than that. Yeah.
And so for us, that's where we live and breathe. We have our path. Consider us somewhere between that Nintendo Switch and mobile. And we have the license to Sesame Street.
Oh.
And we're doing exclusive stuff with them.
That's a big deal.
Now, how many Sesame Street games, which again, the number one edutainment license, 50 years. How many Sesame Street games are on the PlayStation, the Xbox, or even the Nintendo Switch?
Like none.
I'll tell you, 0.
Yeah, there's none.
That tells you all you need to know, right?
Yep.
Edutainment has gone over to mobile, but the biggest problem with mobile, aside from all that other stuff I mentioned, is it's just a person being a zombie.
Well, I think we've learned with distance learning too, that kids have not responded well to staring at an iPad for 3 hours or their phone screen for 3 hours. I think even people who are younger understand why people like us have an affinity for Intellivision. I just think that they do. Because I've been talking about it for 20 some years of my career.
Right.
But how the Intellivision changed everything for me and how it was the first time I played a system where I was like, I could see the possibilities finally of what was going to become. With the sports games, especially football, being able to call plays and basically design plays. It was groundbreaking for the time. And I could see just the animation of the players, the way they ran. And now, Tommy, one last thing I want to ask you about, because it's been a part of your career pretty much the entire time, is game music.
Yes.
So I've worked at so many outlets and I love music and I love games. And so I've always tried to create content around music in games. Every place I've been, I've tried to pitch a segment, a show, an idea, a concept. And a lot of places we've launched the stuff. It never does well. Seriously though, why do you think people devalue music in video games as much as they do? And with that in mind, does it surprise you even more how well Video Games Live has done?
Well, see, again, it's tough for me to think like that.
Because you go back to your early days, you're saying I was the last.
People
person
didn't
who
appreciate
got
it. People made
I had no space left on the cartridge to make my music, and
no, people would laugh at me. What do you do for a living? I write video game music. Really? That stuff I turn off? No, it was, and so I think a big turning point, and this will sound arrogant, but I don't mean it to come out like this. It's just from the amount of letters that I get, which is why I'm saying this. I don't, say this, but others say it to me. A big turning point was when we did our PBS special in 2010, and that reached 90 million households across the United States, right?
Mm-hmm.
PBS is a big deal. I mean, you're talking,
people don't realize the distribution because it's on everything. It's
Paul McCartney, Celine Dion.
Yeah.
And we were the 8th. They've done over 4,000 concerts on PBS. We were the 8th ranked highest performance in history of PBS.
That's huge.
The most letters we get are from non-gamers saying, you know what? I didn't get it. I didn't understand why my kids are so much into video games. But now that I see the music and I see these graphics and the storylines and the characters and the outfits and the cosplay and that, I get it now.
You've created the bridge between.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You look around and it's families.
It is. Yeah.
Together. So now, Shane, after 30 years of victories and 50 industry awards and Emmys and Grammys, all this stuff, I start Amico. What do you think they're saying to me, Shane?
Same thing. They're going to say you're going to fail.
Tommy, you're stupid. And families aren't going to play video games. Nintendo already does this. You're an idiot. You're a fail. You're going to fail. So anyway, to me, it's fuel for me. It's like the more
it's worked for you. I almost wonder if you wouldn't have had these haters if you would have succeeded.
Right? Who knows? Right? If everyone was patting me on the back and give me a trophy on day one, I wouldn't have gone for it.
I mean, I think most people, when someone tells them that they can't do something, it lights something inside them.
Right?
It's just human nature. It's like, oh, really? You think I can't do it? Well, let me show you.
Exactly.
And you've been doing that your entire career. One last thing we like to do on 3-Night Weekend before we go is we ask each guest what they're going to be playing, what they're going to be watching, and what they're going to be drinking this weekend.
Okay. Well, I don't drink alcohol, so and I'm a vegan, so I'll be drinking probably Blue Diamond almond milk chocolate.
Okay.
And I'm a big lemonade guy, but I try to make it without sugar.
What about Arnold Palmer's? Are you fans of the Arnold Palmer?
I'm not a big Arnold Palmer guy.
Really?
I'm more of a Shirley Temple. I like the grenadine.
All right.
But again, when you get older, I just turned 53 last week, and sugar's a killer when you're in your 50s because you put on pounds so much, and
it's also bad for your cholesterol and
and I'm 100% Italian, so I like the pasta too.
Yeah, me too.
So that carbs turns into sugar too.
Yep.
So I'll go with lemonade and chocolate milk. Sometimes I'll treat myself to a Bavarian root beer. But that's a root beer, not alcohol.
Right.
That's what I'm drinking. What I'm watching, I've gone back and I just started. I have a home theater here in my house, and I just started watching from the first one all the way to the most recent one. I started watching Mission Impossible again. God, I love those movies.
They're great.
Were and they just kept getting better and better. Yeah. And the Mission Impossible movies were the ones where there were no Star Wars or Raiders where you've seen it 40 times. Mission Impossible for me, it was like I saw it once. Like I have my favorite movies. Like I've seen The Godfather, Fifth Element, and Tron and Tombstone. Like I've seen those movies 100 times, right? Yep. Even like Guardians of the Galaxy, I've seen like 10, 15 times.
It's really good.
Right. But Mission Impossible was one of those things where I really loved it, but I never saw it again, you know? Yep. So I got the Super HD Blu-ray, whatever they call it, the high fidelity ones, the 4K.
The Ultra HD ones.
Yeah, Ultra HD. And I started watching them. I'm like, God, these movies are so good. So I'll be watching. I think I'm on number 4 this weekend. And then playing, I'm going to tease everyone and saying that, I'm designing most of the games for Intellivision. We have 50 games in development right now. Wow. So I'll be playing this weekend. I'm playing Astro Smash,
classic,
Biplanes, Evel Knievel, and Space Strikers. And so that's what I'll be playing this weekend, games that aren't released yet.
Awesome. And Tommy, where can people find you on Twitter, and where can they find Amico on Twitter? Where can they find Video Games Live? You have so much stuff going on. Right. Where can everyone find all the stuff you're doing? If you go to the easiest thing, go to Tallarico.com, Tallarico, Tallarico.com. And if you just go to the bottom of the page, boom, you'll see everything. It's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. And we're just making an announcement next week, Shane. This is an exclusive. We're actually doing one show in 2021, and it's March 27th in Texas. Wow. Yeah. Where in Texas? It's Lubbock, Texas. Okay. And it's with the Lubbock Symphony. And the city wanted to do this thing where they have like a 3,500 seat venue or a 3,000 seat venue. And so they're selling every third seat. That's great. Social distancing, masks, everybody on masks on the stage. Awesome. Tommy, great catching up with you. No worries. And can I say something before I go, though, Shane? I got to say, you've been showering me with all these, amazing kind words and accolades throughout the last couple hours here. But sir, my hat's off to you because, you've been a person, and we've been friends, and, not super close, but we're always following each other and watching what each other's doing. We'll send messages here and there. But
my friend, hats off to you too, because you're always in the mix somewhere. You're always doing what you're doing.
Yep.
With a positive attitude. So many people out there nowadays, it's so easy to be negative all the time. And again, this is coming from the negative guy from G4, right? But it was always tongue in cheek.
Sure,
It was always good cop.
I always knew that.
It was like people, I was doing it to be funny, not to be nasty or mean.
I think everybody got that.
People can pick up on that.
Yep.
So in a world where drama is a thing and being mean and nasty is a thing, you've always kept it above board. You've always kept it professional and positive. So my friend, hats off to you, because I really admire and appreciate your career as well.
Thank you, Tommy. I really appreciate that, especially coming from someone like you. So once again, thanks to Tommy Tallarico, and best of luck with getting Video Games Live going again. I really am rooting for Intellivision Amico. All right, now that you know what Tommy's up to this weekend, it's time to figure out your path through the next couple days. And I don't know if you guys have been listening to this show every week, but it's pretty good at telling you what's going on this weekend. Let's get to it.
Games!
Just one big full release for today. Bravely Default 2 launches exclusively for the Nintendo Switch. It's available right now. Initial reviews have been a little mixed, but if you're looking for a grindy JRPG, it's a great option. Really, the two big things for the weekend are two demos. There's a demo for Outriders, which I would describe as kind of a cross between Anthem and The Division, and is coming from the studio People Can Fly and Square Enix. There's a free demo for that that's huge. In fact, you can play it for like 7 hours. It's available on pretty much every platform but Switch. And then also this weekend, there is a demo available for the System Shock remake. It's been a long time coming. A lot of people thought it might be eventually canceled, but it looks like it's on the way, and there's a free demo to play right now.
TV and film!
It's actually kind of a slow weekend if you're looking for new stuff on the big streaming services like Netflix and Amazon Prime, but there's a few things worth keeping an eye on. If you're looking for something to keep your kids busy over the weekend while you do other stuff, the Tom and Jerry movie launches on HBO Max today. On VOD, if you're looking for a movie to rent, there's a film called Minari that has been getting a lot of critical acclaim. It's about a Korean family that moves to Arkansas in the 80s. You can only imagine what that was like. And then there's a big documentary launching this weekend called Billie Eilish, The World's a Little Blurry. It's on Apple TV. I'm sure you guys know who Billie Eilish is. She's this gigantic pop star who's still not even 20. Should be interesting to kind of understand where she's come from and how she got to where she is. And then probably the biggest TV and film release this weekend, though some people will disagree, is The Walking Dead Season 10 Part 3 launches on AMC on Sunday. Because of COVID, they have had to split up this season into 3 different parts, and it is kind of the continuation, or maybe really the conclusion, of the Whisperer saga.
Music!
It's a big week for music releases, and all these albums come out today. We're going to recommend 4 different things for you, and they kind of run the gamut. First up is Cloud Nothings, the new album, The Shadow I Remember. If you're a fan of Death Cab for Cutie, they're kind of a harder, more edgier version of that band. Next up is a group called Blank Mask, and the new album is called Inferno. Now, their music has no lyrics whatsoever, and it almost defies description. It's kind of like if the Trans-Siberian Orchestra took on 80s synth pop. Again, defies description. For certain people, I think you'll really like it. Next up is a classic. Alice Cooper, believe it or not, has a brand new album coming out today called Detroit Stories, and I will say it sounds like it was recorded back in his heyday. So if you want straightforward rock, there you go. A new Alice Cooper album. And then finally, the Melvins have a brand new album that came out today as well called Working with God. Reviews for that have been amazing. It's hard to believe the Melvins still doing it after all this time. And they are also kind of hard driving, straight up rock. But they have a great pedigree, and their new album is out today.
Sports!
As always, sports are in no short supply this weekend. There is tons of stuff going on. Kicking things off today, the Trailblazers take on the Lakers on ESPN at 10 p.m. Eastern, and then the Puerto Rico Open kicks off on the Golf Channel, and that's going all weekend long. Saturday's always a big day for the Premier League, and this weekend is no different. Manchester City takes on West Ham United at 7:25 a.m. on NBCSN. Then West Brom takes on Brighton and Hove Albion at 9:55 a.m. on NBCSN. And then the WGC Workday Championship happens at 2:30 on NBC, and that is the big golf tournament on NBC for the weekend. If you're looking for college basketball this weekend, it is rocking all weekend long. If you just tune into any of the ESPN networks, it's pretty much wall-to-wall college basketball all weekend. And then later that evening, the Mavericks take on the Nets on ABC at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Then rolling into Sunday, more Premier League. In fact, you got a triple header on NBCSN starting at 7 a.m., so a little earlier. It kicks off with Leicester City versus Arsenal. The next game is Tottenham versus Burnley. And then the third game is Chelsea versus Manchester United, and that kicks off at 11:25 a.m. If you're into hockey, like me, the Bruins take on the Rangers at noon on NBC. And then for NASCAR, the Dixie Vodka 400 kicks off at 3:30 p.m. on Fox. And then the MLB preseason, believe it or not, kicks off on MLB Network, and there's just games kind of back-to-back all day long. And then if you're into the NBA, the Clippers take on the Bucks on ABC at 3:30 p.m. That should be a really good game.
Esports.
It's another slow weekend for esports. We're still in the pandemic, so it's not a surprise. But the Valorant Challenger Series goes on all weekend long, and the FIFA World Cup is going down in 3 different territories. I'm sure you can find all those streams live on Twitch. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of 3 Night Weekend at Sifted Games at sifted.net. Hopefully by now you'll agree with us when we say that we feel like we've got something really special with this show. Obviously, that's for you to decide, but if you really like it and you want to get more of it, please head to patreon.com/sifted, that's SIFTD, and drop us a pledge. If you want to know when the show is posted for free, follow us on Twitter at Sifted Games. And if you want to reach out to me and maybe suggest future guests for the show, you can find me on Twitter at Dinfire. I'm Shane Satterfield reminding you that every weekend is a 3-night weekend.